What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast, and we're back finally after a long-awaited,
Long hiatus.
long-awaited return. We have finally made our return to the podcast with the NHL trade deadline about a week away, 6 days to be exact, because Friday was yesterday. When you're seeing this video, it'll probably be Sunday, so it'll be 5 days. But we're back, and we've got a trade to obviously break down today. There was another trade that happened in the league before we get into this one. Ryan Lindgren, Jimmy Vesey head to Colorado in exchange for obviously, Calvin DeHaan and Yuso Parsonen along with a second and a fourth. We're not going to break that one down just simply for the fact that there's going to be a lot of deals coming in. So we're trying to pick and choose which ones we're going to break down. And we decided to go with the Gus Nyquist trade because I believe it's a bigger and more impactful trade, in my opinion, compared to the other one. So let's just jump right into it. Gus Nyquist, this is a player that, obviously signed with Nashville 2 years ago in 2023-24, so last season, and actually has played for Minnesota, played 3 games in 2022-2023 before getting hurt, had 5 points during that time. Then obviously signs with the Nashville Predators last season and has a breakout year, 75 points in 81 games, 23 goals, 52 assists, right? He had 4 points in 6 games in the playoffs. So it looked really good for him, and it felt like Nashville was a perfect fit for this guy. The Preds were really happy with him, and he was playing, with Philip Forsberg, and that top line was really, doing some damage over there in Nashville. And like I said, it helped them get into the playoffs. However, this season has been really rough, and it's been really rough not only for him personally, but also for the Nashville Predators, one of the worst teams in the National Hockey League this year. It just hasn't gone their way this season. They haven't played good hockey, and it's affected the play of a guy like Gustav Nyquist in 57 games this year. Obviously, 9 goals, 12 assists, 21 points, and a minus 20 as well. This deal gets happened. It comes into fruition. Nashville decides they're going to trade Gustav Nyquist to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for a 2026 second-round pick. They're also retaining 50% of the salary, so his cap hit, which was $3.185 million, gets reduced to 1.592. So Minnesota will take on 1.5 million of his cap hit, or about 1.6 million of his cap hit, for the remainder of the season, while the Preds retain. And also, I believe the Minnesota Wild have about $6.6 million in cap space to work with as well. If you look at Gus Nyquist, which is from JFresh, Gus Nyquist, acquired by Minnesota, is a veteran playmaking winger, produced over his head last year and decently under it this season. He's still a talented passer, but doesn't shoot or score that much and isn't going to win many races, but gives some back on D at 5-on-5, though he could also play on the PK. So if you look at some of his advanced analytics, and he's listed as a second-line winger. So, Zach, what are your thoughts on this trade for Gustav Nyquist? Do you like the move from Minnesota? Do you like the move from Nashville? And just kind of give your thoughts on the player overall.
Well, I think for Gustav Nyquist, it's a good deal for him. He's on the last year of his contract, and he's going to be able to play it out. Not in Nashville, a team that was expected to make the postseason again this year, but obviously their season took a different trajectory. But he'll be entering the frame with the Minnesota Wild, who right now, with 34 wins, are a team that are comfortably in a wild card seating in the West, with the nearest teams being, a good chunk of points still out of it. So, Minnesota's in a really good spot. This is a team that started off the year, I think they won 12 out of their first 15 games.
Yeah, they looked really good.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. And what we've learned over the past, couple of years now is that Bill Guerin is an aggressive GM who's going to make moves to improve his team. And he does it with a guy in Gus Nyquist who, look at his past 2 years, numbers wise, you're projecting it here. Look, he was a 75-point guy last year. Yes, he was benefiting from playing on a line with Ryan O'Reilly and Philip Forsberg, 2 players who really helped him elevate his game. And this year, not as productive. But, I think Gus Nyquist, to be honest, is still a trusty top 6 option. If a guy would not given too much responsibility, let's say in a defensive role, he's a guy that could play on your power play, your first or second unit. He's still got quite a bit of skill. He's not the most explosive skater as he was once in Detroit,
right?
But this Nyquist is still a nice serviceable option, and he's landing in Minnesota at the right time, right? Because Joel Eriksson Ek is on the IR now. It's still, his injury is undisclosed, but he was, as of February 25th, reported to be on the IR. And obviously, Kirill Kaprizov, who is going to be missing at least 4 weeks. So they add a guy to kind of keep the ball rolling for them. And then once they get if they get Joel Eriksson back before the playoffs, and when they get Kirill Kaprizov back, this is a nice depth addition to a team that hasn't struggled with scoring this year, and really could grind some teams out, because they do play defensive hockey, the sound defensive hockey, but they're a team that are very quick in transition and are able to score in bunches. Great move for Minnesota. They give away a second round pick, which I think by come trade deadline, like you said, in 5 days would have been market value for Gus Nyquist. We're only gonna have to pay him about 1.6 because half of his salary was retained. And for Barry Trotz and the Nashville Preds, look, they're sellers. Everybody thought they would be in a clear playoff spot this time around, but things didn't turn out. The mesh of the team didn't work with the free agents that they added. Marchessault is another guy I think we're going to be potentially covering in the next couple of days in a video, because he could be another guy on the move, right? Like Marchessault is still producing at a borderline elite level at his age, and he's kind of right now he'd be a great trade piece for a team like Nashville that unfortunately is going to have to mortgage some of their assets. So I'll send this one back to you now. Like, do you think Minnesota? How much do you think Minnesota improves in the short term with this move, and then like how much do they improve in the long term once they get a healthy roster for the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely improve short term. I mean, you're adding a player who, like you said before, right? Like had a really good year last year and had a down year this season. But you're adding a guy who has played in the top six before and has familiarized himself with that role. Can help on the defensive side of the game, can help on the offensive side of the game, can play on your PP1, PP2, like you mentioned. And also the other thing too is, although he only played 3 games for the Minnesota Wild due to injury, he has familiarity with the city. He has familiarity with the team. Having played there recently. And, in the small sample size that he had in Minnesota, he was really good. 5 points in 3 games, right? So it's a player that I think...
Very small sample size.
Yeah, very small sample size. But, it's still a sample size, right? Like it's small, but it's what we have to go off of. And, I mean, he had in 6 playoff games with the Wild, he had 5 points. So he's got familiarity in terms of where he's at in Minnesota. And if you look at, obviously, Daily Faceoff over here, they have him projected on the second line right now with Freddie Gaudreau and Matt Boldy. I think that's probably where he's going to end up. I don't think they want to touch the top line of Marcus Johansson, Marco Rossi, and Matt Zuccarello. But obviously, when Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov eventually make their return, I think we could see a little bit of a shuffle in the lines. I could also see a situation where Kaprizov obviously jumps into the line 1 spot, obviously, with Marcus Johansson going down to maybe the 3rd or 4th line. And then you have Gustav Nyquist probably on the line with Joel Eriksson Ek and Matt Boldy. So it helps Minnesota's depth on forward. Like you mentioned before, they're a team that scores in bunches, but I think in the playoffs, you're going to need depth pieces to be able to help you out. You're going to need guys that are going to help you, let's say, score goals and be difference makers. And obviously, Nyquist is a guy who, he's a playmaker. He's a guy who can create chances. And I think if you can put him in a position to be able to create chances and be able to, let's say, give the goal scorers the opportunity to get the puck on their sticks, I think he could be a really big difference maker for the Minnesota Wild. So I like it. I think it improves them short term and obviously long term. I think for Minnesota, it's more about trying to manage the injuries of obviously Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov on offense to kind of, let's say, limit, how many, let's say, losses they'll get during this time. I believe they lost yesterday. So, they got to find ways to be able to manage that. And I think they've done a good job to it so far. But if Nyquist can be an addition until those guys come back and then continue to be an addition once they do come back, I think it could be a really good move. And the price to pay is a 2026 second round pick. It's a high price. I mean, a second round pick can be pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at some guys that obviously got drafted in recent years, Lane Hudson.
But it doesn't affect them. It doesn't affect them this season, right?
Right. Exactly.
But this move is purely a rental, right? He's 35 years old.
Yeah.
I doubt he would be in Minnesota's plans next year. I could be wrong. He could have an amazing playoffs, an amazing rest of the regular season, and then this conversation changes. But I think at 35 years old, still productive though. I think they're
Right.
just going to get him as a rental. Like,
I agree.
this is what it is. Like, when they also have guys coming up in the pipeline. They're not going to want to commit to Gustav Nyquist beyond this year in their top 9. That's for sure.
No, and I think the other thing too is, like you said, right? It becomes a rental, but it's a guy that, you know, could be a, like, it's not one of those like depth rentals that's like a third line guy that you ended up overpaying for, right? This is a guy who, you know, could be a difference maker, has proven that in the playoffs he's able to produce in the playoffs, and I feel like it's going to help them out. And even if even if he doesn't resign with Minnesota, it's not a big price to pay. A second round pick, like you said, is you're trying to win a Stanley Cup at the end of the day. You're not, you know, you're not really worried about trying to draft. And Minnesota's in that position where they're not necessarily a contender, but they're a team that could definitely get into the playoffs and do some damage. So, you know, I don't blame them for obviously moving draft picks. And then if you obviously look at Nashville, well, like you said before, right? They started the offseason. They were deemed the winners of the offseason, right?
You're the
They
winners
brought
of
in,
July 1st, that's for sure.
right. They
Right?
were
Steven
winners of July
Stamkos,
1st.
Marchessault,
Yeah,
Brady Shea, all of these big contracts
yeah.
for veterans. I
Just
believe
doesn't work.
they had a point streak of 18 games last year starting in February.
Yep.
They
Yep.
were going out hot into the playoffs. And obviously Jussi Saros was great last year. But this is a team that was supposed to carry on momentum this year.
Yep.
The reason they didn't is, as like I said before, like, I don't think they got the right mesh with their group.
No.
You know, Stamkos is not a player who you're getting to be dominant 5-on-5. Unfortunately, at this point of his career, he's got a great one-timer on the power play. You know, he could still produce a little bit 5-on-5, but he's more of a specialist now these days. But
Actually,
I don't know. Like, I think probably what happened is that they forced a bunch of moves, thinking, look, we could upgrade our team on paper and everything will be figured out. But it's not what they needed. They didn't need a Steven Stamkos. They could Marchessault is a different story, but I don't think they needed a Steven Stamkos or a Brady Shea when you already have a guy like Roman Josi who plays you know, the full 2 minutes on the power play. Like, your Brady Shea is, you're not getting the most out of him. That's my take.
And I think the other thing too, right, is I feel like last year Nashville had an identity. Like, you know, we knew that they were a team that was young. They were playing maybe above their weight. I think people could argue that, you know, they had a season last year where they overperformed, but they had a structure. They had an identity. It was a team that no matter who you were playing against or who was playing them, right? They were going to come. They were going to play 100%. They were going to be physical. They were going to be faster than you. They were going to outskate you and outwork you, and they were going to find ways to win games and score goals. And then, you know, obviously, I think Barry Trotz looked at the team and said, "Look, we got to upgrade our team." And I think come July 1st, he does that, right? Brings in obviously Stamkos, brings in Marchessault, like you mentioned, brings in Brady Shea. But it becomes a big thing of like they kind of like ruined what their identity was, right? They went for the big names. They went for the guys that, you know, were popular players amongst their teams, but not necessarily guys who were probably the best fit for that team, right? Steven Stamkos, like you mentioned before, past his prime, he's more of a specialist now versus, let's say, being an actual effective player 5-on-5. I think Jonathan Marchessault, like you mentioned, he's having a good season. Like, I think that was a good addition, and I think if they would have only made the Marchessault addition, I think we'd be having a different conversation today.
Maybe things will be different, but
Yeah,
I think another thing is that Coach Brunette is getting exposed for his style of play this year.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
he didn't adapt, and you saw it right off the gate, right out of the gate this year. They were still playing an aggressive forecheck kind of style, like very, very aggressive off the puck, which was a style that worked for them, like you said, defensively last year, and being able to almost play in this pesky way, and they would ride on a hot goaltender to win games. But the situation's changed. You can't play that style with guys like Marchessault and Stamkos who are, you know, well into their 30s.
yeah.
So they didn't make the right additions, and
No.
it's and it cost them now. And now they're in a situation where, part of my language, they have their dick in their hands. So they basically they have to write
Well
off
done,
all the
well done.
mistakes they made July 1st, right? And they're
Yeah.
not going to get fair value, but that's just the name of the game right now. This is a
Right.
team
And
that is Barry Trotz has been hinting actually for the past 2 years of a rebuild. Will we see a rebuild? Still to be determined. They still have fantastic players in their prime, like Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg and UC Saros, who they just signed last season. So maybe it's probably going to be a retool for them, but
I
they're
think
not going to be getting, like I said, the value that they want.
right. But if you look at their cap space, and I have it pulled up right here, and if you look at just their draft pick summary, I mean, this is a team that has an abundance of draft picks this year and next year now, and even in 2027. So they're definitely collecting and trying to build for the future. I mean, 3 first rounders, 2 second rounders, a third rounder, a fourth, a fifth, and 2 sixths this year. And then next year they have 1 first, 2 seconds, a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a seventh. So this is a team that's collecting draft picks. They're stockpiling draft picks. They're trying to build for the future. So
Absolutely.
I think it's more just, I don't know if it's a retool, but I mean, it was kind of weird because like we said, right? Last year they made additions during July 1st to bring in a team to be competitive. And now they're making moves to try to retool / rebuild the team. But even if they retool, they have a lot of assets in terms of draft picks to be able to go out there and kind of change their team, or they can use those draft picks to draft players and become a really, let's say dynamic offensive team for the next couple of years after that. So I don't know if it's a one-off with the Predators. I was very surprised at a team that last year looked like they were going to take the NHL by storm. And then obviously with the moves they made over the offseason, I was like, okay, this is a team that could really, take the next step this year. And it just hasn't turned out that way. And I think for Barry Trotz, it's about trying to salvage what's left of this season and trading in those guys that, have some sort of value and seeing what you can get for them. He's already made a couple of moves this season. He traded Alex Carrier to Montreal for Justin Barron. He traded Scott Wedgwood to Colorado for Justus Anunin. So he's made a couple of moves. I think he even traded Juuso Parssinen to Colorado. So he's made moves already to kind of change the team around. And now, again, obviously today trades Gustav Nyquist. There's a possibility, like you said, that they could trade other guys. I do think there's potentially an opportunity to trade a guy like Jonathan Marchand. So if it's there, and I guess we'll see. But one of the things that I think Barry Trotz made a mistake on last year is he wrongfully analyzed the chemistry that I think the new additions were going to come in. And I think, like you mentioned before, I don't think Andrew Brunette's done a very good job adapting to this team and adapting to the players that he had. And I do believe that that's also taken a big toll on the Nashville Predators as an organization, because if you watch them play, they're not exciting to watch at all,
No,
right?
not
And
at
so
all.
that's a big problem, I think, for the team. And you mentioned obviously Steven Stamkos. I just want to say something. At the time that we're recording this video, the game between Nashville and the Islanders is over, and Steven Stamkos actually scored in his own net on an empty net. So just to top it all off for a rough season
Bad
for
for
the
the
Nashville
Stammer.
Predators. Yeah, exactly. Just to top it all off for a rough season for Nashville, it just keeps getting from bad to worse. And now, obviously, with the addition of Gus Nyquist, they're going to be a lottery team this year.
Probably, yeah.
Which is
I think
which is okay.
you could almost guarantee that they'll be selecting in the top 5 this year. But
Yeah,
this is what they need. They need dynamic forwards in the pipeline.
I agree.
Everybody had high hopes for Phil Tomasino and Luke
Shoot, that's who they
Evangelista.
traded too. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. He got traded earlier in the season.
Yeah.
Evangelista is still there, but I believe Evangelista has something like 11 points this year. He's,
I'm not sure. I have to
correct
let
me
me
if
see
I'm
that.
wrong, but I think
Let me search that.
Evangelista is having another year where he's not, he's playing with Tommy Novak and
16.
Steve Stamkos, but he's got 16 points this year.
Yeah. 45 games played, 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points.
Yeah, there you have it. I mean, they need to invest in young prospects, especially at forward, because this team is right now, even like you said, watching them, they don't look dynamic at all. And I think they like we said, they misevaluated their strengths in the offseason. I think that was the biggest thing. Like, look, right now they have in their top 9 Jake Lucchini, who is a perennial, AHL player who's been moving around, who moves around quite a bit.
Played for the Habs and Sens farm team, by the way.
Yeah, and he played up in Canada with the Sens.
That's true.
So,
He did.
Michael McCarron on the fourth line, there's not much in their bottom six either, like with young prospects. That's exciting.
Actually, he's another guy that's drawing interest, though. They might trade him too, McCarron. I was hearing rumors that, well, that's what they're tweeting, that the teams are interested in him as a fourth line guy for
Yeah,
some
he could
teams,
play a
but like
role.
that's not going to get you much, I don't think. So
It depends who's asking. If there's some
right.
teams that probably give away a third round pick for him, but that's
I
another
mean,
problem.
if Michael McCarron's going for a third round pick, the NHL has bigger problems. You know what I
It
mean?
does.
But there's bigger problems going on if that's the case, because
Maybe
Michael
it's a
McCarron's
move
pretty
Steve Yzerman is going to make. Who knows?
yeah, to try to add his fourth line. I don't know, but I mean, listen, they don't have much. Like in terms of rentals, they have left is Kiefer Bellows and Luca Evangelista, and on defense, Andres Englund, who they picked up
I
off of
think they got
waivers.
off waivers. He started the
Yeah,
year with Los Angeles.
that's it. So like they don't have much in terms of like guys that are rentals, apart from obviously Nyquist. But maybe a team, maybe Marcia. So they're like, you know what, it doesn't work out. Let's trade him. Maybe Ryan O'Reilly. They turn around and say, you know what, adios amigos. Who knows? But I mean, like it's interesting to see what the Preds are going to do. I just think that no matter what happens, like you said, right, they're going to be a lottery team this year. And you know what, if they can get a top 5 pick or even a top 3 pick, that'll go a big way for this team. And who knows if it'll be a one-off. I think Barry Trotz has some decisions to make this offseason, though, as to where he wants this team to go. And for the Minnesota Wild, I mean, look, it's an addition that helps them out now, and at least for the foreseeable future until they eventually get eliminated from the playoffs, or if they win the Stanley Cup. And then after that, I don't know if Gus Nyquist makes a return, but maybe if he plays really well, like you said, Zach, maybe they turn around and say, you know what, we'll give him another, let's say, year.
A year. Yeah.
Right, and see if we want to keep him. So it works out for both teams. Good trade on both parts, and I mean we'll see how it works out for Minnesota, and for Nashville, we'll see what they do between now and March 7th. If there's any other deals that they decide to cook up, and even for Minnesota, if this, I don't believe Minnesota's done. Maybe they'll add something else. There's rumors they're interested in Armia and Jake Evans of Montreal. There's rumors that they're in on Michael McCarron as well, which is kind of ironic. And then also there's rumors that they've also been interested in like guys like Brock Nelson if they become available. So they're looking for a center. I don't know where Minnesota's going to go if they decide to make another move, but there is rumors that they are still actively looking. So we'll see what happens between now and March 7th. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think I have much else to add other than that. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Ryan O'Reilly maybe is a guy that you think he'll get traded. We'll end it off at that.
I think so. I mean, yeah, like he makes 4.5 for the next 2 seasons after this one. I think if a team is like, look, we want to make a run in the playoffs, we want a guy with a little bit of stability. We know what Ryan O'Reilly can bring. His contract's pretty reasonable too. I could see a team being like, you know what, let's do it. And if Ryan O'Reilly's willing to go and willing to, let's say, chase a cup, I could see teams lining up for Ryan O'Reilly. And I think you can get a pretty penny.
Yeah, I thought the Leafs were a great fit for him. That one playoff run that they had. So maybe it's in the cards that they run it back. So we'll end that on that note.
Yep.
So guys, as Lucas mentioned, the trade deadline is approaching. It's 5 days away. We're gonna be posting more videos. I know it's been a kind of a long hiatus, but we're gonna be back, and we're gonna be stronger. There'll be more appearances from myself, Luca, and Chris. So guys, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media. This has been Zach from the ynggpodcast, and
Luca.
And thanks for watching, guys. Peace.